Welcome to episode 1 of Pretty Impressed, my iconic short-form, not very thought-out series of videos. Famous, of course, for me taking a game I have played anywhere between 1 and 100 hours and delivering you a half-baked, poorly considered opinion. There also won't be any of my usual spoiler-filled nonsense because I want you to actually try this game, so this is a little different, right? Think of me as a cat bringing freshly caught prey to your doorstep. Haha, but the prey is a dandelion. And the cat is a grown man crying on your porch in his underwear. You see, you've been had. This video is stupid, much like me. Astlibra Revision is the first game brave enough to ask the question, what if Ys made gentle, thoughtful love with landscape photography? The answer, of course, is yes. The creator, Kaizo, that's all caps if you looked away, spent 15 whole years on this game, and the people, they appreciate the effort. The game has an overwhelmingly positive score on Steam with over 20,000 reviews. Oh, and you also might be asking, why do the backgrounds look like, this? Well, that's because Kaizo couldn't afford an artist, and chopping up free stock images is what he actually knew how to do. You don't spend 15 years on a single game unless you're really damned determined to make it happen. You can get a lot of insight into all of this though because he was cool enough to do some AMAs over at Uninformed Opinion Town, Reddit, over at Reddit. Also jarring is the fact that the character art is not stock, as I'm sure you've noticed. The sprites are actually very decently animated with expressive, custom portraits. The main character and the supporting cast do not look like they emerged from the same stock photo fever nightmare the backgrounds did. That's thanks to the artist Shigetake. A huge deal of the character animation, portraits, and bosses were all done by him. He has a distinctive style, and it's safe to say that he has a absolute favorite part of the human anatomy. They're moving independently of one another. Where's gravity? How? Why? Stock art and godless boobs aside, what really makes Astlibra Revision special is the combat. If you're familiar with older titles like Falcom's Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys, or Vanillaware's Odin Sphere, you'll have a good understanding of what this game is trying to achieve. It feels good to wail on stuff and see big numbers happen. Astlibra is very aware of this and will serve you a delicious amuse-bouche of dumb enemies that will just take a huge beating while you stack combo numbers and send them directly to Monster Hell, where of course, all monsters go.
Damn, all of them?
Okay, a couple can stay. But the rest, hell. Wait, did you really walk by just to ask me that?
Yeah, later, nerd.
Oh. And there's all kinds of weapons, spells, and skills, and they mostly all feel satisfying to hit bad enemies with. To reinforce the combat loop is the fact that the monsters drop items used to craft your new weapons, which in turn are stronger than the old weapons, making the numbers bigger. And no gamer can resist a number getting bigger. Give me them big numbers. The only complaint I had was the sheer bombast of seeing all these effects as you drown your opponent in spells and weapon swings. It means an enemy can sneak in a cheeky projectile for some cheap feeling damage. This might not be a problem for you though, dear viewer. My ability to not see things on screen can be worrying sometimes. I have seen a few corners of the internet compare Astlibra to a Metroidvania, and I think that deserves a little clarification, because this title is most certainly not that. It's easy to mistake it for one if you were to look at just screenshots. It shares a lot of the same visual language, to be sure. Metroidvania games typically are just dungeon crawlers with backtracking and little puzzles, and dungeon crawling will be the bulk of the gameplay you experience in Astlibra. If you look at the footage I'm using for this video, the vast majority is me just wailing on different monsters in discrete locations. The difference is the dungeons in this game are very largely linear. You might wander around a bit, maybe get a little lost, but these dungeons are concise and stand alone. And I don't mean to imply this game is all hallways in a straight line. There's plenty of hidden secrets if you take the time to explore. But if you're going to try and get to the end of a dungeon, you're not likely going to be scratching your head as to how you achieve your goal. You're going to grind and kill, and if you're me, have fun, and then you will take that cumulative experience and prove to a boss how much of a badass you've become. As for uncommon encounters, such as bosses, they're typically big, usually screen-covering affairs that offer up a decent challenge, and they're balanced nicely to not feel like a pushover. Typically, you won't need more than 1 or 2 tries to beat a boss. Typically. And if they're too much, you can always just go grind levels, but I would hesitate to call this game grindy on that note. I never felt much in the way of impatience or boredom while I was looking for materials or gaining experience. The game maintains a very brisk pace throughout. But if you want to dig deep, stop and smell the roses, there's plenty of ancillary mechanics under the hood. You have Karen points, skill points, armor that unlocks skills, stats to upgrade, this scale thing, I don't think I ever really understood what it was doing, but it's here, and an entire item crafting system. There's plenty of ways to tinker and break the game wide open if that's your thing. The story itself follows a pleasant episodic approach. While the runtime is about 60 hours or so, sans extra bosses and bonus content, each story arc can be split up very nicely. Fishing village with a weird cult, that's about 5 to 6 hours per its episode, and you'll beat it in a few sittings. And I mention episode, I mean episodic here. Every time you beat a chapter, it'll do closing credits like you're finishing a TV show. After you clear it, it's on to the next adventure. This is a pretty similar approach to how games like Dragon Quest tend to operate. Smaller scale issues to solve, while a larger plot churns on in the background. It's tough to do right because it's basically just 4 steps repeated. Enter new place, learn about problem, discover new item to help you on your journey, solve problem using very likely violence, repeat. It can get a little tiring, but the game is pretty good about dangling mysteries to keep you interested in the next one. These small stories are generally engaging and offer nice little bits of character building. I would probably find them even more engaging if it weren't for what felt like a so-so script. Despite having a touched-up translation from its first English release, I would still say a lot of the dialogue here is Spartan, a risk of perhaps being too literal with the localization, or maybe a consequence of having a rather dry script. For example, the game's jokes aren't really very funny ever. I don't think they ever landed. Sometimes they're horny and unfunny, so at least I have common ground with the game there, but either way, the nuances of language don't come across. Not to say this isn't improved from the original release. The story makes sense now, which is a huge step up from the machine-translated babbling of the first pass we were given at launch. When I got the game, I actually stopped playing once they promised the dialogue update because I was getting very confused at points. The new characterization is strong enough that I would say that everyone has a general archetype now, and the greater narrative holds somewhat together. There are some weird lines though, seriously. Karen says here that he can't tell what he's looking at. Buddy, Karen, that's a lady. This is just big. What are you, stupid? I don't often speak on translations though. I only speak English, and unless someone has spoken about their process in some way, I have little insight to how the whole localization process works, so I will judge the script on its English alone and say it's good enough. I didn't see any moments of this guy are sick. That being said, the narrative largely involves time travel, edgy boys, sexy divine beings, and other favored topics of the early 2000s. It feels like a throwback in the best sort of way if you have nostalgia for the era around PS2 storytelling. The inciting incident involves your village being attacked by monsters, including this very handsome big dragon. After escaping, you pass out and wake up in this cabin in the middle of nowhere with no idea how you got there. You befriend, as all people lost in the wilds do, a talking crow and your future companion for the rest of your adventures. Why a talking crow? It's plot stuff. I can't tell you. Your quest from here on out will involve mostly looking for your childhood friend, the girl with whom you fled from the dragon at the beginning. After literal years of wandering around the uninhabited lands, you finally find your first evidence of a human settlement. You have been in the woods so long, you are an adult now. This sounds strange and mysterious, right? I mean, it is. And the game is aware of this. A lot of the mysterious events early on are the groundwork for how the story plays out. It actually feels a little like the show Lost, heavy on the supernatural mysteries and isolation. I also mentioned at the beginning that there's some fan servicey moments in here, and they're sprinkled throughout the story, but none stuck with me as something you wouldn't see in a shonen anime in terms of lewdness. The only thing that might catch you off guard are the few select unusual moments of fan service, and when I say unusual, I think I mean the word specific, as in, it's very particular that this girl is threatening to put the sweaty soles of her feet onto my face to wake me from slumber, just like That's really going for something very specific, you know. Most people do threats a little more broadly. But I'm not here to kink shame either, so look at this. Oh yeah, do you feel that? The rhythm, the natural urge to just never stop grooving? That's the power of license-free internet music. Yes, similar to the way he used stock photos, Kaizo once again dips into the realm of just some stuff I found online to great effect. The soundtrack, by nature of being free stock music, is all over the place, but hear me out. What looks like a random pile of laundry reveals itself to be a nicely organized, folded pile upon closer examination. You wouldn't think pulsing techno and anime guitar solo stuff would work so well in proximity to one another, but Kaizo really does a great job of matching the right track to the right location. A good example is this rainy swamp area with the song very appropriately named Rain playing. Listen to this. I'll have what I'm having. As you can imagine at this point, I've clearly enjoyed my time with the game, but everything about it kind of screams that it shouldn't be as good as it is. It's hard to put a finger on why. Like, I'm over here wailing on an animated JPEG of a caterpillar having the time of my life. This invites a burning question. Would I like this game if it looked like a normal old game? Does a part of me just sort of like how insane this looks? I say though in all sincerity that none of my enjoyment here is ironic. I just like this game. The combat feels good. It gets the right dopamine releases at the right moment. Crafting weapons isn't too grindy and offers a great power boost that feels like a substantial reward every time. Spells are flashy and fun to cast. The characters, while tropey, are fun to get to know. The larger story presents enough mysteries that you kind of want to know what's going on. And thanks to the strength of all of these elements coming together, the crazy graphics and music just kind of become the language of the game. They fade into the background. Suddenly, this forest full of tree.png, copied and pasted ad nauseum, isn't a weird scrapbook page you just wandered into. It's a forest. A lush, beautiful forest filled with danger and adventure. It's just tough to see at first. The stock stuff is the glasses on the hot girl in the movie. You know, that whole thing. There's a smoking hot babe under these glasses, if only she'd just take them off. This game is the pinnacle of greater than the sum of its parts, or at the very least, a shining example of the power of fun first game design. But in summation, Astlibra receives a glowing score of pretty ding dang neat out of fun. And at $25, it's a really good deal if you're looking for, this kind of game. And that's all for this one. I know this is a lot shorter than my usual fare. I'm thinking about varying it up for the channel a bit because the length of time between retrospectives with work and all the things in my day-to-day mean longer waits for you. And honestly, there's lots of good games to talk about, so I hope to use this smaller format to highlight more niche titles, maybe sillier things. Let me know your feelings on the format if you care. That being said, as always, likes and subscribes are deeply appreciated. The algorithm is such a silly goose, and also if you want to share the video with somebody, that actually would mean the world. But that's asking a lot. So go play Astlibra, don't listen to me. Oh, also, I suppose it would be a good time to shout out my one paid patron. It's Silvar. Wow, there he is. If you aren't aware, I started a Patreon. I'm gonna add a link in the description below and the pinned comment too, and whatever. And in honor of me remembering that I actually have a Patreon, I'm gonna go ahead and drop a video over there today to coincide with the release of this. It's going to be very silly, and it might not make you a smarter person to watch it, but that's on you. You know the risks now. And that's all I have. Until next time, bye!